This video is sponsored by FlexiSpot. I used 1,126,863 votes to decide who is the best Formula One driver. This is definitely not the first time that this question has been asked. The best, the greatest, the GOAT are terms thrown around a lot when discussing Formula One drivers' achievements. Is the best driver ever the driver with the most wins, the most championships, the most dominant season in the sport, the best haircut? Of course, there's no way to perfectly answer this question, but trying to answer it could be quite fun. The first hurdle was deciding what makes you a Formula One driver, because I don't think it's necessarily just driving a Formula One car. There have been a lot of people over the years who have had the opportunity to test drive or take part in a Friday practice session, but in many of those cases, they haven't driven for long enough or against anyone competitively to actually allow us to form an opinion on them. So I don't think that they should count as a Formula One driver. So I decided that a driver could only be included in this list if they had entered a World Championship race and then been classified as part of the official Formula One Championship standings, which narrows the pool of drivers from everyone in the world to 778. That is until the start of the 2025 season. Then I came across another problem in that Formula One is old, like really old, 75 years old this season to be exact, and I'm not 75 or even close. And looking at my analytics, you're also not 75. You're more likely between 18 and 35, which made me think, do you know this man? If I showed you this picture and asked you, how good is this man at driving a Formula One car? And then I had to make you decide, is he better than, say, this man? Would you be able to tell me which of these two men was actually the better Formula One driver? I don't think you could, because I couldn't, and unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of Formula One drivers from the past. You have to remember that during the 50s, the Indianapolis 500 was part of the Formula One World Championship, meaning back then a lot of drivers joined the grid for just one race during the season, like Johnny Mance here. People who watched Formula One 60 years ago, let alone people now, wouldn't have known who Johnny was. Which means I decided that as most of us are between 18 and 34, so would have likely started watching F1 towards the end of the 90s at the absolute earliest. For this first study, I would narrow down the selection even more so to drivers that have competed in any Formula One season since the year 2000, which still leaves us with 127 drivers to pick from. I appreciate that some of the drivers that are often thrown into the greatest of all time debate don't meet this criteria, so if you want me to do this video again with all of the F1 drivers ever, this video needs to get, let's say, 2,000 likes. However, now that we have our 127 drivers, how do we put them in order from best to worst? I could have made some kind of ELO system, but that kind of thing is for nerds to do. So instead, I thought one of the best ways to rank items in a list is to show people two at a time and get them to pick the best one from that pairing. Then you show them another random pairing, and again, they pick the best driver from those two. The drivers who are perceived to be the best will consistently get voted for, and the worst drivers will get voted against. With 127 drivers, there are 8,001 possible driver pairings, so as long as I get enough of you to vote enough times, I don't have to go through and look at every possible driver pairing and pick out who won, but instead just keep track of the total number of wins and total number of losses for each driver. So that's exactly what I did. I made a list of every F1 driver who'd been classified as part of the Formula One World Championship standings at any point since the year 2000, downloaded their Wikipedia photo, which, by the way, are some of the worst photos that I have ever seen. Like, how on earth is this the best picture of Esteban Ocon that they could find at the time? It baffles me, but I digress. And after I put all of those photos into an online survey, you guys got to work, and after a combined 1,126,863 votes, these are the results. But just before we get into that, I need to tell you about FlexiSpot. Since moving into my new house, I've rebuilt my entire desk setup, and the absolute game changer has been the FlexiSpot E7 Plus standing desk. First off, this thing is rock solid. The E7 Plus has a robust four-legged design that keeps it stable even whilst adjusting the height, and it can handle up to 200 kilograms of weight. So even though I've only put a Lego car together on it, the thing can handle basically the weight of an entire F1 power unit and still keep running. It is so easy to set up. It took me and my dad maybe an hour, but the dual motor lifting system is quick, it's quiet, it's precise, and the new and updated digital control panel that lets you save 4 height presets between 66 and 131 centimeters, it is perfect for switching from editing mode to standing and feeling productive mode to filming video mode with just one tap of a button. Not only is the height customizable though, but it also works with loads of tabletop sizes and accessories. From a compact home setup to an ultra-wide setup like mine, the simple frame makes building your perfect desk setup just really easy. The cable management keeps things cleaner than a fresh set of soft compound tires, and the monitor adjustment just means my posture is so much better than it was at my old desk. And even though the desk is built to last for multiple F1 seasons, just in case, it has a 10-year warranty too. You can check out the FlexiSpot E7 Plus via the link in the description, and by doing so, you'll also be supporting the channel too. Now, back to the drivers. I know some of you, even though this video is about finding the best Formula 1 drivers, are really only here to find out who the worst driver was. And I was expecting this to be somebody fairly obscure that a lot of people didn't know very well, because some of the actual worst drivers were at least memorable and people would vote for them because it's funny. However, I did forget that one driver by the name of Nikita Mazepin is so disliked that he created a category all for himself at the bottom of this list. Mazepin managed to win just 12% of the matchups that he was shown in, which is horrendously low compared to the rest of the list, but considering they took away his fastest lap award for the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix, he can now at least be the recipient of the worst driver in Formula 1 award. Another notable mention of negativity, I think swaying the vote, was Lance Stroll, who only won 31% of his matchups, leaving him to be ranked 88th on this list. That's the lowest of any driver currently on the grid. That's below Jack Doohan, who was gotten rid of at the beginning of the season, and below Logan Sargent, who is, well, Logan Sargent, and still managed to beat Lance Stroll in this ranking. In fact, looking at the overall list, I would say most pay drivers did a lot worse than their skill level would actually suggest. So the pay driver hate is still well and truly thriving in the Formula 1 community. Speaking of, one more driver I know you'll be expecting me to talk about in all of this is Nicholas Latifi, the GOAT, Goatifi. Didn't quite end up being voted as such in this ranking. However, he did manage to win an impressive number of matchups with a 39% win rate, which put him 73rd overall in the ranking. I suppose getting a fastest lap during the third free practice session before the 2022 Hungarian Grand Prix has got to count for something. Surprisingly, Verstappen is ranked 55th. Jos Verstappen, that is. And less surprisingly, the lowest ranked race winner was Pastor Maldonado, the Venezuelan managing one career victory at the 2012 Spanish Grand Prix for Williams, but you guys only saw that as being worthy of 40th place on the list, as he only managed to come out victorious in 58% of the times that he was shown during the voting. Anyway, the best drivers, what we're actually here for, starting in 10th place, Carlos Sainz. And although I agree that he is incredibly talented, I do think that him being on the grid now and being one of the most likable characters on the grid has played into his favor a bit here. I think it's the opposite of what we saw with Nikita Mazepin. I guess that Carlos is likely to win fairly generic matchups because most people quite like him. 9th place was Mika Hakkinen, whose career highlights mainly took place in the 90s, with his championships being won in 1998 and 99, but because he retired in 2001, he was still eligible for the voting and won 88% of the matchups that he was shown in. Next on the list was Nico Rosberg, just the one world championship to his name, but he did win it against Lewis Hamilton, whose spoiler is a little bit higher up on this list. And previous to that, he was teammates with Michael Schumacher at Mercedes, so never had an easy run of things whilst he was at the Silver Arrows, but always managed to hold his own and prove that he was a brilliant driver. Then we get to the highest ranked non-world champion, well, at least for now, in Ferrari's Charles Leclerc. Again, I think that it helps that he's still on the grid now when it comes to the voting, but I also think that there's no doubt, given the right car, Charles has shown that he has the raw speed advantage over almost everyone else in the sport's history. Easily one of, if not the best qualifier on the grid right now, and would likely win a championship if given the machinery to do so. The problem is he's relying on Ferrari to deliver him that car. Next year is the year though, right? Actually, talking of Ferrari champions, 6th place on this list went to the last Ferrari world champion in Kimi Räikkönen, a fan favourite for his personality, or lack thereof you could say, but he was also part of some incredible storylines throughout his time in the sport, nabbing a championship from Hamilton and Alonso, bankrupting the Lotus team, and just go to think how good he could have been were this not just a hobby to him. Now on to the most shocking result for the entire list in my opinion. Lewis Hamilton only managed 5th place. He still won 94% of the matchups that he was shown in, but considering that he has the record for the most pole positions in the sport, the record for the most wins in the sport, and in many people's opinions, should also have the record for the most championships in the sport, I would have gambled on him at least achieving a podium place in this ranking, but there are clearly a lot of F1 fans out there that maybe retract from his achievements due to the dominance of the Mercedes team at the time. I don't know, you'll have to argue about it in the comments down below. Just off the podium in 4th place is a 4-time Red Bull World Champion, Max Verstappen. Even though he's already achieved ridiculous things in Formula 1 and broke almost every record that there was in 2023, he's still actually a lot younger than the other drivers around him in this ranking, so it's not impossible to think that in a few more years' time, he could move himself even higher in this list. Although that could also not happen, because for how good he is at Formula 1, he does seem to hate it from time to time, and it does feel like a when, not if, as to him moving over to another racing series at some point. 3rd place is the most experienced driver that F1 has ever seen, and he still isn't stopping yet. Fernando Alonso, a 2-time world champion, widely regarded by even himself at times as the unluckiest driver in Formula 1, and seeing as he was only 8 points away from being a 5-time world champion, you can understand why, but his talent is clear to see, and that's what's placed him so high up on this list. 2nd place, winning 97% of the head-to-heads that he was shown in, and everyone's favourite beekeeper, Sebastian Vettel, the guy who was a 4-time Red Bull World Champion and broke all of the records before Max Verstappen came along and matched him doing exactly the same thing, but throughout his 299 races, he went from the driver that everyone hated to now, as you can see, one of the most loved drivers that there has ever been. If only he'd have managed to win that championship with Ferrari, I think he might have snuck to the top of this list. Now, I appreciate that this might not be the best way to decide which F1 driver is the greatest of all time, but I also don't think there is a perfect way of comparing all of the variables and all of the ridiculous things that have happened throughout Formula 1's history. What this ranking does give us is an insight into not only the statistics around these drivers, but also how each driver is perceived by the wider Formula 1 world. F1 is entertainment after all, so you could argue that how much a driver is liked and disliked is something that should play into how good of a driver they are for the sport. So despite the arguments around the different eras of Formula 1, how the sport has changed, and the influx of new F1 fans thanks to things like Drive to Survive and Liberty Media, the #1 driver on this list, more than a decade after he retired from the sport, is Michael Schumacher. I think he's right in the sweet spot on this list. There will be a lot of you watching this that remember watching him absolutely dominate the start of the millennium with his Ferrari car, and then a lot of newer fans who have heard about this dominance secondhand and how it's spoken about in legendary terms akin to the greatest achievements in the sport. Schumacher had the raw talent and speed to beat anybody, he had the determination to work harder than anybody, and he was more than happy to bend the rules just in case it didn't go his way. He is the greatest Formula 1 driver since the year 2000.